So good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for logging on. I'm really pleased that so many of you could join us. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Suzanne Caldwell. I'm Managing Director of Cumbria Chamber of Commerce. So a quick little bit of housekeeping. We are recording this session. One, so we can make it available to people who weren't able to join us, and two, it will be available so you can share it should you wish to with colleagues and other contacts. So by staying on the call, you are sort of agreeing that you're happy with that. As you know, we are in the consultation period for Devolution. So we as the Chamber, together with Cumbria Tourism and CBI, felt it was really important to give businesses a really good opportunity to find out more about what's involved and to ask questions that are pertinent, particularly to business. Hence this session, which we're running between us. I know people do have a range of views on devolution. But I mean, we feel really strongly as the Chamber, whether in principle you think devolution is the right thing or the wrong thing, at the current point in time, there really isn't another option if we're to get the best we can for Cumbria. So if we're to make sure that we're heard nationally and if we're to make sure we get the funding and flexibility that we need to make Cumbria the best it can be for all of its businesses and all of its people. So that's why we're so strongly behind devolution and indeed the mayoral version of devolution. So the consultation is a consultation that's led by MHCLG, and that's part of the process. And we really would encourage you to get involved in that. And remember, as they'll explain to you in the presentation, it isn't just about your view of yes or no. It's about the shaping of what we get as well. So that's about it from me, because I'm keen for us to get to the bones of the meeting. But I did also just want to mention, I went to the MHCLG, their own consultation and their own event presentation as part of the consultation last week in Penrith. And although I feel that I am reasonably well informed, actually I did learn things from it, and it was a really good presentation, a good, useful question and answer. So I'm really looking forward to what they've got to say for us today. And we're also going to be hearing today about the practical experience elsewhere, and there'll be an opportunity for questions and answers. So the last thing from me is just to say, if you have got questions either that you don't feel comfortable asking publicly, or that you don't get time to, or indeed, if you're anything like me, that you think of afterwards, please do send them through, and we'll endeavour to get answers for you and get those out to you. So with that, I'm hoping that we have got MHCLG on the call. There's so many people, I can't see who's where, but I'll hand over.
Suzanne, hi everyone.
Oh, hi Josh, I didn't spot you there.
Yeah, hiya. Very good to be on the call. Thank you so much for inviting me to come and speak to you all today. It's really good to sort of meet you and have the opportunity. Yeah, just to introduce myself, I'm Josh Walker. I'm an official at the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, and I work on new devolution agreements, including the Cumbria devolution proposal. I'm going to give about a sort of a 10-15 minute presentation on what the consultation sort of is and sort of some of the kind of ideas and thoughts behind it and what it might mean for Cumbria. And then very happy to sort of stay on and sort of take any sort of questions that people have. I'm going to try and sort of attempt to share my screen if I can get that to work. And I'm really hoping you can all see that. Does that work?
Yeah. Yes, it does.
Great. That is the first bit of tech out of the way, which is good. So what I'll sort of cover is a bit of the sort of the background to what is devolution, or what is the program that Cumbria are in, move on to what that means for Cumbria, how it might work in practice and the sort of impacts that it might have, and then sort of finish off with a sort of how to get involved in the consultation, because as Suzanne said, this consultation is live at the moment. It's open until the 13th of April. We're keen for as many responses as possible. And in particular, we're really, really keen to understand not just whether people agree or disagree, but actually sort of the reasoning and the evidence and the information to sort of that sits behind that. So we'd really encourage all of you to get involved and respond. And if you take sort of nothing else away from my presentation, so please take away that point about like we really want to hear from you and we really want you to respond to the consultation. But then just to sort of move on to some of that background. So when we talk about devolution in the English context, what we mean is the ambition that government has to move power away from Whitehall and from central government and into local communities and local leaders who know their areas and their priorities and the interests of the local areas best. The Prime Minister has this sort of phrase that he uses around sort of people with skin in the game, sort of making the decisions, and that's really what it's about. It's rather than sort of officials and ministers in sort of Whitehall taking decisions on things that affect Cumbria, but actually those decisions being taken at a more local level. A lot of this was articulated in the English Devolution White Paper, which came out towards the end of last year, and that sort of turns that sort of very broad ambition to something more sort of practical and talks about the importance of having a kind of ambitious sort of framework across the whole of devolution, and the sort of various sort of paths and sort of statuses that exist in the sort of devolution landscape. And it also set out an overall aim for every part of England to have devolution. In terms of sort of turning that into reality, that's when we get to the Devolution Priority Programme, which was launched alongside that white paper. And that is all about fast-tracking areas who want to establish devolved institutions and have a mayor elected by May 2026 with the associated powers and funding available. There are 6 areas on that programme. One of them is Cumbria, and the councils of Cumberland and Westmoreland and Furness came together to apply to be on this programme, and government accepted that application. So this is a sort of a locally led sort of process from the councils, but we're now working very closely with the councils to sort of try and get to that place of May 2026 mayoral elections. So what does that all mean for Cumbria? The proposal will be the establishment of what is known as a mayoral combined authority over the geography of the 2 local councils of Cumberland and Westmoreland and Furness. It's really important, I think, to say at this point that is sort of different from local government reorganisation, which I'm very conscious has already happened in Cumbria a couple of years ago, and it's not about the sort of reintroduction of a sort of county council, and this is not about sort of changing sort of service delivery or sort of changing those sort of local government structures that are sort of now in place across kind of Cumbria, and things like adult social care or bin collection or sort of highway maintenance will sort of stay where they are. This is about sort of moving some of those more powers that primarily sit with central government down to a more sort of a local level. But specifically, what is a mayoral combined authority? So this would be a new organisation that is set up. It will be made up of the 2, it will be within the area of the 2 local councils, and the idea is it enables more strategic and joint decision making across that sort of wider geographic area, and it would primarily focus on issues where there is a real benefit in working together across that larger strategic geography, such as, for example, transport or skills. It will be led by the directly elected mayor, who will be elected by the residents of Cumbria every 4 years, the first election being in May 2026. Because this is a mayoral option, that means that there is more powers and funding that would be available compared to, for example, devolution without a mayor, and government is prioritising mayoral devolution at this time. And there are currently 11 other areas across England that benefit from devolution in this way. The most well known is Greater Manchester and sort of Mayor Andy Burnham there, but there's lots of other examples as well. You've also got York and North Yorkshire as a more recently created one. There are places like Hull and East Yorkshire and Greater Lincolnshire who are about to elect their first mayors in less than a month's time. So this is a sort of a growing area where more and more places across England are taking on these powers and having a mayor. So what could this mayoral combined authority do? I'll sort of set that out in sort of high level terms, but there's also sort of quite a lot of detail sort of behind this. So obviously feel free to ask questions, but this is also something where I'd say the kind of consultation document sort of sets out in a bit more detail, and also the English devolution white paper itself sets this out in a bit more detail. But there are broadly sort of 6 main areas, and then a final point about sort of representation as well. So those 6 areas are transport, where the new mayoral combined authority would have powers and funding related to particularly sort of public transport. So it would have the ability to do improve the bus network, for example, through bus franchising, which is what Greater Manchester has done with the B network, or do something called an enhanced partnership, which is where there's a sort of a stronger relationship with bus companies that enable, for example, some more sort of standardization. It would also have a role in the rail network as well. The mayor would have a new sort of statutory role set out in law that would involve them more in sort of rail planning decisions and working closely with Great British Railways. And it would also have some sort of strategic oversight around the most important roads within Cumbria, as well as working closely with national highways on sort of on roads which are nationally managed. But like I said, the sort of highways maintenance roles would still sit with the councils. It would also have powers and funding relating to skills. So, for example, at the moment, adult skills funding, something previously known as the adult education budget, if people sort of are more familiar with that term, sits with central government, and the criteria for how that is administered is determined by central government and within the Department for Education and its ministers. That funding and how that funding can be used would be devolved down to the combined authority. So it would be for local leaders and the mayor to sort of take decisions on what the priorities for adult skills are, and to, for example, enable sort of better matching of the skills provision in Cumbria to the sort of needs that businesses and organisations have in relation to skills. The combined authority would also have powers around housing, which would enable them to take a sort of more strategic view across the whole of Cumbria around housing provision and how to sort of tailor that both to sort of local need and some of those sort of more strategic economic considerations. There will be powers around economic development, which would be enable greater business development and growth in some of the key sectors that exist in Cumbria. And there would also be sort of stronger, more strategic partnerships with, for example, the Department of Business and Trade, which could support greater sort of export support or inward investment work, as well as, for example, UK research and innovation. The combined authority would also have powers around environment and climate change. For example, it have a particular role in local nature recovery strategies, and it would work very closely with the Department for Energy and Net Zero on how to embed what is happening in Cumbria with the government's national missions around climate change and achieving net zero. And then finally, it would have a role around supporting health and well-being across the whole of Cumbria, and it would have a particular role in improving health outcomes and tackling inequalities across the whole of Cumbria. And I think it's really worth saying at this point that one of the possible benefits that the combined authority could have is it would have powers and responsibilities of all these things, and it would also be able to sort of think about them from, I call it a place first perspective. But what I really sort of mean by that is from a kind of like, what is happening in Cumbria, what are the needs of Cumbria, and how can that best be delivered across these areas compared to what could happen at the moment in terms of, Department for Transport thinking about things from a transport perspective, or Department for Education thinking about things from a sort of skills perspective. I mean, there's something about that sort of join up between all of these areas. So when thinking about sort of transport, how does that sort of support sort of health and well-being kind of in the area more so than might be done at the moment in the slightly more sort of siloed central government model. And then the final thing on this slide is around representation, and the mayor would firstly be a really important figurehead for Cumbria, and we'll be able to raise issues that are important to Cumbria at a more sort of national level. And I think there's plenty of examples of how some of the existing mayors have used their platform to sort of advocate and sort of ensure that their region has a really strong voice on the national stage. But that would also be sort of embedded in particular ways through having a seat at the Prime Minister's Council of the Nations and Regions, and also the Deputy Prime Minister's Mayoral Council, both of which allow for an opportunity to get involved in sort of the national sort of decision making and kind of conversations around national priorities and how Cumbria can support that, but also how devolution could be deepened over time. One of the things that the white paper makes really clear is that this is the existing devolution offer, but the government sees this as the floor, but not the ceiling of what is on offer for devolution. And the intention is to have a deeper devolution offer over time. And the Deputy Prime Minister's Mayoral Council is a way to get all the mayors together and say, okay, how could that deeper devolution sort of happen? And Cumbria would have that sort of role. The Cumbria Mayor would have a role in sharing, what is needed from a Cumbria perspective. There. The only other final thing to say on this slide is that there is the associated funding that comes with these things. So I talked about, for example, adult skills funding moving down from the central government to the combined authority level, but there would also be some elements of new funding as well. So there'd be an investment fund, which is brand new money that doesn't currently exist in the system, that would come down for the mayor and the combined authority to spend on local priorities, which has sort of very little restrictions around from sort of central government in terms of how that can be spent, and is really sort of designed to be used to reflect the kind of local needs and the local priorities that Cumbria would have. And in time as well, Cumbria could achieve a sort of deeper devolution state called established mayoral status, which would allow for further powers and funding to flow through to Cumbria. How would the mayoral combined authority work in practice? We propose in the consultation document that there will be 5 members within the combined authority, 2 from each of the constituent councils, so from Cumberland and Westmoreland and Furness. Those members will be sort of elected politicians from those councils, but is ultimately for them councils to decide who those individuals would be. Typically, it's the sort of the leader and another member of their cabinet, but I don't know who sort of Cumberland and Westmoreland and Furness would choose. And then the 5th member would be the mayor themselves, who, as I said before, will be directly elected on a 4-year term starting in May 2026. Between those 5, they would take most decisions on a simple majority basis, including the mayor. So that means 3 out of the 5 voting in favour, but the mayor would have to be part of that 3. There'll be some decisions that would be purely for the mayor to make, and some functions that would sit purely in the hands of the mayor. That reflects the mayor's role as the sort of accountable sort of figurehead who is able to sort of represent the whole of the region. And there'll be some other decisions as well which might have slightly sort of different voting arrangements. There's also the opportunity to have additional members who can be known as non-constituent or associate members, and they're really to give the combined authority a more sort of external voice and sort of outside expertise into the running and the sort of thinking that goes into the combined authority. Who those members are is for a local decision to be made, but in other areas that's been, for example, district councils where they exist, or the police and crime commissioner, or a voice from business themselves, or for example someone from the education sector or the NHS. And it's worth saying as well that even though there is that sort of up to 4 limit for those members, we'd really expect and encourage the combined authority to work really closely with all types of organisations and sectors and stakeholders across the region to ensure that they're really understanding their area and are able to sort of reflect the views of the whole of Cumbria in their decision making. So what are we consulting on? So we are basically consulting on what I've just talked through, and that proposal to establish a mayoral combined authority. And we're asking questions around the geography of the combined authority, how it would operate in practice, and what are the benefits that may be delivered through establishing that mayoral combined authority and the mayor. There's until the 13th of April, so about a week and a half or so, to respond to the consultation. And please do respond to the consultation. As I said at the beginning, we want to hear from as many people as possible, and in particular businesses who can provide sort of information and evidence as to what impact the combined authority have is incredibly useful to us. So please sort of do respond and get involved. Once the consultation has closed, we need to advise our ministers on whether to proceed or not with the mayoral combined authority. That is on the basis of a series of statutory tests that have to be met. And this is why it's really important that we get the kind of evidence and information in, because we need to satisfy a legal requirement that these statutory tests have been met in order for ministers to proceed. So it is sort of crucial. It is really important, and it will make a difference. If ministers take a decision to proceed, then the councils still need to give their further consent to go ahead. So it can't happen unless the two councils agree that this should happen. And if they give that, then legislation will be brought before Parliament and would need to be voted on by both houses of Parliament before coming to effect in time for those May 2026 elections. So how you can have your say, there's a QR code sort of on the screen which will take you directly through to the consultation, but also you can go on the gov.uk website and that will have a link to the consultation document, and from there you can get onto the online form. I'd say that online form is probably the sort of easiest way to respond to the consultation, the quickest way to respond to the consultation, but you could also email a response through to the mailbox that is on your screen, and you could also post your response as well if you'd prefer. And just to reiterate, you have until the 30th of April to do that. But that is my presentation. I will stop there, and I'll stay on in case anyone has any sort of questions following on from that. But back to you, Suzanne.
That's great, thanks, Josh. So I think what we were going to do is we were going to hear from Mark about experiences elsewhere, and then David, and then we're going to go to all the questions following that. So Mark, can I hand over to you, please?
Thanks, Suzanne, and thanks for that presentation, Josh. Really, really useful. So for those that don't know me, Mark Goldstone, I work in the CBI's policy team that covers devolution. I have my colleague Simon Dishman also on the call if questions get a bit too technical for me. So really, I think of all of that, the one bit that I would probably pick out as being probably the most important was the last piece on slide 7, which is that role of mayors and the ambassadorial role that they play in other regions in particular. They are the person that, you can pick up the phone to if you're an investor, but actually as important, that's the person the Treasury can pick up the phone to. And I say that not in jest necessarily, but because there's quite a lot of requirements, how public money gets spent, scrutiny, accountability, and that's really important, and that is the role of the mayor. So that's why I mention it, and the reason I mention it is that for those that haven't read the Devolution white paper, it is actually a good read. A lot of good stuff in there, but it's quite clear that it says there are effectively will be 2 tiers of devolution, and they are with a mayor and without a mayor, and the difference in opportunities, in powers, in funding that come with that mayoral role are quite significant. So Josh set out all of those areas that the mayor will have control over. All of those will be greatly expanded under a mayoral devolution model. So definitely worth reading through the paper. There is actually helpfully in the devolution white paper, there is a table at the end of the paper which sets out what powers go under what jurisdictions. So definitely you'll see quite a lot of difference in terms of what you can actually do with a mayor versus what you can't do if you don't have a mayor. So definitely worth a read of that. And in terms of my experience and CBI experience from other regions, we've already heard mentioned West Midlands and Greater Manchester who've powered ahead, and they really have actually. And in terms of wins, So West Midlands announced, I think it was last year or the year before, that Legal and General would invest £4 billion in their region. Now, I can tell you, because Legal and General are one of our members, I'm pretty sure that would not have happened if Andy Street wasn't there to answer the phone. So, they didn't, I'm sure they wouldn't wanted to have to deal with however many local authorities there are in the West Midlands. So it just makes that investment opportunity so much easier. Greater Manchester, if you've not been to Manchester recently since the B network has been established, it's seamless. It's absolutely seamless. And there's talk of expanding it into regions beyond Greater Manchester potentially. But it just brings that connectivity around the city to make it easier for people to access jobs, education, leisure activities. And I know, having spent many, many years in Cumbria over the years, transport is a big issue. Getting to school, getting to colleges is a big challenge. So I think having somebody that can take control of that and really just make sure that the investment goes into the right places, again, that is a perfect role for a mayor. Maybe not for mention today, but another good example is the work that's happening in Teesside. So BP, SEA, the South Korean offshore wind farm, that was due to go to Hull. But Andy played a great role. Ben, get his name right. Ben played a great role in landing that one in Teesside, and it's there. The investment is coming in as a direct consequence of having a mayor. So I cannot underestimate just how important the role is, and why it's important that businesses in particular get behind, the idea of having a mayor. I think it will make a massive difference. I think I've probably used up my time allocation, Suzanne, so I'll pause there. I could go on forever. As you can tell, I'm very passionate about the role of mayors, but I'll hand back to you if that's okay.
That's great, and people will have an opportunity to ask you questions shortly. But before we get to the Q&A, I'd like to hand over to David Beebe, who is the chair of the Economic Growth Board.
Thank you, Suzanne. Good afternoon, everybody. For those of you who don't know what is the Cumbria Economic Growth Board, we were appointed in September. We are an advisory body to the two local authorities, focusing on economic strategy and economic development, and effectively growth, but for the benefit of the people and places of Cumbria. The Economic Growth Board has got 16 members, plus myself as chair. We've got representatives from small, medium, and the large enterprises in Cumbria. We've got representatives of the education sector in Cumbria. We've got representatives of the charity sector. So we're broadly based and strong representation. Right at the start, we were asked for what is our view on, and I'm pleased to say about half a dozen of the members of the board are on the call. So thank you for joining us. And we were asked right at the start, what is our view on devolution? And to cut to the quick, we very quickly sat down, looked at what devolution had to offer, and concluded unanimously that we were in favour of the maximum devolution possible, and that is a mayoral combined authority. Josh has actually explained many of the reasons, really, in terms of his presentation. Why? Basic principle: the more decisions are made in Cumbria for Cumbria, the better. Decisions are made in London about what to do on, for example, Josh talked about skills. Part of our organisation is Enterprise in Cumbria. We deliver the skills programmes that are centrally funded. We deliver the programmes that are designed in London and are the same across the whole of England. Wouldn't it be better if they said, well, here's the pot of money, you design the skills programmes that are required in your county for your employers and for the development of your workforce to meet the needs of the county? I think that's a very straightforward answer to that. I think the other thing that was clearly touched on by Josh is actually there are big meetings going on with the Prime Minister, with the Deputy Prime Minister. We're not even there. We don't have a voice. We don't have a seat at the table. We're not even getting the crumbs because we're just not there. So it is very, very important that we establish our presence representing Cumbria, and the way to do that is having a mayoral combined authority. We talked about investment funds. Josh mentions investment funds. We know that to achieve the economic strategy and our the updated economic strategy will be published shortly, that we will need inward investment. We know that we need government support for some major infrastructure investment. We know that we will need inward investment on a number of other projects in Cumbria. A single voice representing Cumbria in those discussions enhances our chances of getting the investment that we need, which is for the benefit of the people and places of Cumbria. So very simply, I'm 100% in favour of it. The whole board is 100% in favour of it. And we believe it is the right way forward for Cumbria to develop into the county we would really like to see over the next couple of decades and beyond. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much, David. Which brings us on to questions and answers now. I'm hoping that I'm going to manage to spot people with so many people on the call. So if you feel you're being ignored, if you could pop yourself into the chat, just your name, and we'll pick it up that way. But I think we've got Simon first of all.
Thanks, Susan. Yeah, I just wanted to come in on after Mark's fantastic piece on the benefit of mayors and mayoral combined authorities. I just wanted to highlight a speech I listened to from Andy Burnham, delivered at the Institute for Government yesterday. If you want to see an articulate message delivered by a mayor showing the benefits of that mayor, that leadership position, the mayoral combined authority and devolutions had on a particular region, then I'd strongly encourage you to all go and watch that speech by Andy Burnham yesterday. It really articulated that powerful message about the role that mayors have within a particular region. Andy Burnham said the jury's in on the combined authority model, showing it works. He said the devolution model and the combined authority showed a primacy of place. We've seen the skylines of Manchester and Salford being transformed over recent years, telling the story of growth and confidence in that particular region. And also, while Manchester is seeing the main benefits of devolution, we're now seeing the benefits of devolution expanded across the Greater Manchester region to include cities and towns like Stockport and Rochdale. Andy also highlighted that the narrowing of the north-south divide has taken place. We're seeing a boost in productivity and growth within Greater Manchester as well. And then, as Mark also highlighted on his particular point, we've also seen better integration of public services and transport, including the recent introduction of the B network. Not to mention, finally, at this point, we've also seen the rollout of the integrated settlement for the Greater Manchester Combined Authority take effect this week. That provides greater long-term funding for the region, enabling businesses to invest with greater confidence in that particular region, but also with other integrated settlements coming online in the future. That will enable businesses to invest with greater confidence with that longer-term funding settlement. So with that, it's kind of that vision it's a vision currently for Cumbria that could be made a reality. And I would strongly urge you to go back and watch that piece by Andy Burnham at the Institute for Government yesterday. I just wanted to highlight that particular point. But I can put the link to the video in the chat.
That's great. Thank you, Simon. Right. Have we got questions from anybody else?
Suzanne, can I just add something?
Absolutely, you can, David.
Because Simon spoke extremely well about Manchester and what's happening in Manchester and the impact it's having on Manchester. And that is absolutely right. It demonstrates what can be done with a mayor. What is very clear as well is, of course, that Cumbria is a very different place to Greater Manchester. It's not a city region. It's not structured in that way. And so the answers for Cumbria will be different to the city regions. And that kind of illustrates the point of why you have to have a mayor for Cumbria, because we need different solutions for Cumbria. We can't just cut and paste models that go on in the very successful city regions. So Andy Burnham is demonstrating, as is the mayors in other places like Liverpool and everything else like that, Steve Rotherham, they're demonstrating that it works, but it is uniquely different to each area, and Cumbria is very different from Manchester. And let's understand that, therefore, what we want from the mayor and what the mayor will be able to achieve and do in Cumbria will be for the benefit of Cumbria, but it won't be a cut and paste from the city region. Thank you.
Right, I can't spot any other hands up at the moment. Oh, yes, I can. David.
Hi, Suzanne. Sorry I'm late. I couldn't get the link.
Oh, no problem.
Suzanne, some great presentations that we've done and some really good comments from David as well, because I think My comment was going to be, before Davey said, is Greater Manchester has done very well. I live in Greater Manchester, but it is very different to Cumbria. Cumbria is a rural county and rural area, and most of the areas that have got mayors, I think the only other one will be York and North Yorkshire, with Davy Snaith as mayor there. And again, very different. I suppose it would be how we feel or where we see the opportunities for some of the rural areas of Cumbria to flourish under a mayoral authority than on a combined authority with a mayor in comparison to just the urban areas. And I think there's other areas then we're involved in activity around York East as well, and the Humber and Hull. And I think the rural areas just think all the money's going to go to Hull. So a little bit is how we think we can balance that in Cumbria being a very rural county, and how we can make sure it comes to the fore. Thanks, Suzanne.
Thank you. Josh, would you maybe like to say a little bit more about how you get more powers and more funding over time? Might that be useful?
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right to sort of highlight that the differences between sort of Greater Manchester and Cumbria. I also live in Manchester, so I'm sort of living in a kind of mayoral sort of area, but which is obviously very different to Cumbria as an area. I mean, there's definitely lots more of England getting devolution, and lots more of England that is very different from that sort of very urban sort of Manchester sort of model. So Hull and East Yorkshire, York and North Yorkshire has recently elected a mayor. Greater Lincolnshire, also on the devolution programme, you have areas like Norfolk and Suffolk. And now these are all sort of different areas, but also possibly have slightly more in common with Cumbria in terms of being more rural, more sort of geographically dispersed. And David made a really good point around how just because you have the same sort of powers and sort of funding opportunities and the same, I guess, sort of inputs, that doesn't mean that you sort of have the same in terms of what you do with them. And one of the really big purposes of the mayoral combined authority model is that there is much greater flexibility and control as to how local areas sort of spend that money and use their powers based on those local priorities. I think this also links into the importance of having that sort of representation at the national level, and how these powers could be sort of expanded and sort of evolved over time. So if, for example, there is more that can be done on the devolution front to support rural economies, for example, I think that is something that a mayor for Cumbria might sort of, say, actually, like, this is what is needed, this is what Cumbria kind of needs, and they have the kind of clout and the way into central government to make those representations, to have those sort of formal opportunities for engagement with government, but also just the sort of general sort of standing of kind of being a mayor and having that sort of greater presence in the media, or with sort of stakeholders and with sort of departments as a whole, to sort of make that case for going further and saying, actually, like, this is what Cumbria needs, and this is what the next step of devolution needs to be. So it's definitely a sort of a process, devolution. This is not the sort of end point that government wants to see in terms of what is available for devolution. And there's, the greatest opportunity to sort of shape where devolution goes into the future will be to sort of have that mayor who is able to sort of make the case for, pursuing and going further in certain areas.
One of the other things that people often ask about is, I think, having gone through local government reorganisation, we had the county and the district, so we've now gone to two single tiers, and I think people get a bit confused between how devolution with the mayor is different to that. So could you maybe say a little bit more, Josh, on how this is, this is additional, this isn't splitting things back up again?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it really comes back to how the local government structures as they currently aren't going to change. And the existing kind of Cumberland and Westmoreland and Furness aren't going to sort of change in any way. And really what the Combined Authority is doing is bringing powers and funding that are currently sat with central government and putting that at a kind of more local level in the sort of Combined Authority. And the white paper sort of, I think, quite clearly sort of sets out that, like, if you want powers and funding to kind of be moved down from that sort of central government to a more local level, like, that is the model that government is pursuing, kind of across sort of England, and that is the way to sort of have that happen. So yeah, it's different from, say, the county council, and it has a very different function to what the county council previously had. It's much more in the realm of primarily sort of economic kind of growth, but actually sort of increasingly we're seeing combined authorities work on sort of more sort of social issues, getting involved in the environment. There's a big sort of public health angle to what a lot of the combined authorities are doing, but it's bringing together things that it makes sense to work together at that sort of bigger strategic level, and a lot of the sort of powers and sort of funding are sort of unique to being a kind of combined authority. So they are sort of powers and funding that the previous county council would not have had access to, and some of these, for example, like having a particular legal role in, for example, the planning of the rail network, is not something that the county council was previously had any sort of role in sort of doing, or sort of certainly a legal role in sort of having. So a lot of this is sort of brand new and things that weren't previously available to even the sort of the previous local government structure.
That's great, thank you. So has anybody got?
Suzanne,
oh, Mark, there we go.
Yeah, sorry, good. Just I think all good points, Josh, really good, and the two Davids as well, great points. I think the bit that I would also mention that we are starting to see now is not just collaboration between regions and central government, but actually collaborations between regions. And I mention that because the UK isn't that big a country, and when we try to land in with investment into the UK, sometimes we compete regions against regions. And I think what we're starting to see is the mayors coming together across the north, for example, across the Midlands have just signed a compact. We'll have a new mayor in Lincolnshire as of 1st of May, and they're already starting to talk to Cambridgeshire and Peterborough just below them. I think that cross-border collaboration is really, really important. I think the one thing that I have seen that is starting to end now, which is you set up a combined authority and it spends all its time looking inwards and thinking about itself and then not really thinking about the regions that sit around it. And I think having that mayor-to-mayor conversation, or mayors plural, we've got Convention of the North, for example, and the mayors generally nearly always attend that. Just having them as a collective voice, preaching up, in this case, the North, but collaborating across borders, I think is really, really important. And at the moment, Cumbria isn't really in those conversations, and I think it really needs to be. So again, I'm pushing the mayoral agenda again, but I think that's a big reason to be, having a ticket to that party.
Great. Have I missed anybody who's got a question? No? So I'll just reiterate then that if you do come up with questions afterwards, or you have any others that you haven't wanted to ask today, do just email them through, and we will we'll get those answered for you separately. So if there aren't any other questions, I'll hand over then to Jill.
Thanks very much, Suzanne. Hopefully you can hear me all, everybody. I'm Jill Haig, Managing Director of Cumbria Tourism Local Visitor Economy Partnership, and this is part of the Economic Growth Board, for those who don't know me. I think, as David said, sitting on the Economic Growth Board and having had the opportunity really to have been exploring this for quite a number of months now, it's a no-brainer, I think, is where we've got to. And just listening to that presentation again, the more you hear it, the more you realise what the opportunities are for us there, and actually the risk of not taking this route as well, and of Cumbria being left behind. We've it's next, in many ways this is exciting. This is a real opportunity for the county, and we know that we have a great deal to offer, and that we are a critical national contributor. But somehow outside of the county, we don't always see our light shine as brightly. So it feels to me that the calibre of the mayor that we get is going to be critical in order to seize some of those incredible opportunities that are there. But the key words that I've taken away from just today is, funding that we wouldn't have otherwise been able to have taken opportunity for, powers, the voice and positioning. David, you made it, and Mark made really clear reiteration of the point that it's you are going directly into the Prime Minister, into the Deputy Prime Minister, into the Treasury. But most importantly, this is Cumbria working for Cumbria and doing what Cumbria knows is best for Cumbria. And I take on board those points that were also reiterated about with our neighbours, where that's appropriate to do so as well. So, I think we should feel ambitious and excited about this as an opportunity. But I really feel that every single one of us on this call has a responsibility to complete that consultation form and not to do it as I did the first time and just tick through it because we're in a bit of a rush, but to really take your time and think about the responses that you want to give. David, I know that as an economic growth board, we've pulled together a response which is going to help inform how we respond as a body. And I don't know how much of that we might be able to share with other partners.
Yeah, we will be making that available. We'll also have a sort of pro forma response if people want some help in thinking about how to respond. Obviously, it's for each individual, for each business, it's your own decision. What I do know, which is just worth adding, is that when you fill out the consultation, there is a personal one and a business one. I know both authorities are very interested in what is the business view. That will be separated out, and that will add strength to the feeling that this is the right way to go. If there is a strong response from business, that the Mayor Combined Authority is something we really want and believe in. So I do encourage you all as businesses to respond to the consultation, and if you believe, I mean, it's your decision, but hopefully you'll be supportive. But if you're not, you should still respond.
Yeah. Thanks, David. I didn't have anything further to add, but thank you to everybody who's been part of today, and to Suzanne and Matt for convening.
That's great, and thank you everybody else for everyone for participating, and hope to see you again at something soon. Bye.
Thanks, Suzanne. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.